Hi, I'm Meredith, the voice bringing you the audiobook of The Wind in the Islands. I'm letting you know that The Wind in the Islands is brought to you by Glassgoat, an art studio and farm in the Thousand Islands. Check them out at glassgoat.com.
Welcome to another chapter of The Wind in the Islands by Scott Oderkirk. Chapter 5, The Mermaid.
The mole was fascinated to see the panfish, turtles, and plants moving about under the surface of the water as he and the rat rode through the lilies and cattails of the shallow area of Chippewa Bay where it meets Chippewa Creek. "Daddy, what does it look like when you are swimming about under the surface?" asked the mole.
"Pretty much like what you're seeing right now, but imagine it looking through a glass bottle surrounded by water,"
said the rat. "What about where I can't see, in the deeper water?"
"To be honest, Mole, I've never told you about that because I didn't want you to go crazy wondering about it,"
said the rat. "What do you mean? What is down there?" said the mole, unable as usual to hide his excitement.
"Well, there are bigger fish, of course, and sunken boats and ships,"
described the rat.
"And anything and everything people have accidentally dropped off the side of the boat. Oh, and the mermaid,"
he added quietly, hoping the mole wouldn't catch that part. The mole mumbled, "Treasures and boats and giant fish and mermaids." He stared down into the water. "Wait, what is a mermaid? And what does he do?"
"A mermaid is a person, a woman actually, but with a tail like a fish,"
the rat explained.
"She lives in the deep water. It is a whole other world down there. I can't go very deep myself, but the water is so clear that I've caught glimpses of the life that exists below."
"A woman with a tail? I've got to see this mermaid," said the mole. "Is she ever on the surface?"
"Just put that out of your mind,"
said the rat.
"There is no way for you to see a mermaid, and I rather doubt she will be surfacing anytime soon to see you. I've never seen her in all the time I've spent under the water. I've just heard about her from the turtle, a very old snapping turtle, and he is not someone you want to spend too much time around. He is a bit snippy."
"How can I get down there?" said the mole, hoping to learn even more about the river.
"You can't,"
said the rat sternly, thinking that maybe he could stop this disaster before it went any further. "I bet the toad knows of some contraption that will get me under the water to see," said the mole.
"We can ask him,"
said the rat.
"but I can't imagine that he will be much help."
The rat already did not like where this was headed. The next day the mole and the rat rode down to the toad's place to ask him. "Why, of course I've seen the mermaid," boasted the toad. "I went down in a bottle. Not much of a swimmer myself, but I just had to see her after the turtle told me about her." "In a bottle?" said the mole with a tone of disbelief. He wasn't sure which surprised him more, the toad under water in a bottle, or him having a conversation with the turtle and not becoming dinner. "Yes, just screwed the cap on and lowered it down on the end of a rope," said the toad. "I had a bunch of squirrels running on a treadmill to power the machine. I couldn't trust them to figure out the thing on their own, but with the beaver up there to supervise, it went pretty well. The beaver could have come down to save me if things had gone badly. Had the whole thing built on a raft. It is still out in one of the boathouses collecting dust if you want to use it." The rat was looking on, shaking his head, thinking that this combination of the mole and the toad was going to lead to something bad. "I want to try it," said the mole. "Can we go right now?" "Come back in a couple of days," said the toad. "I'll have my handyman replace the ropes and give it a looking over. Of course, I'll also need to gather up the squirrels and schedule it with the beaver." "Will I see the mermaid?" asked the mole quietly. "Can't promise that," replied the toad, "but you will see things you've never seen before, that is for sure." The next 2 days dragged on for the mole. He mumbled and daydreamed and bothered the rat incessantly. The rat knew that the mole wasn't going to wait any longer, so exactly 2 days later, according to the sun, they made their way back to the toad's house. As they rode up to the castle through a morning mist, they caught a glimpse of a large raft holding a collection of beams, ropes, and pulleys, which almost hid the treadmill full of squirrels. The beaver stood near what appeared to be the front, using a large hammer to adjust a moving part. The squirrels that wouldn't fit on the treadmill were darting up and down and sideways on the beams. A large clear glass jug with a looped handle was sitting on one side with a long rope coiled around it neatly.
"A disaster waiting to happen,"
said the rat, But as he looked over at the mole, he knew his words were wasted. The mole had a glazed look in his eyes, in which one could almost see the daydreams if you looked closely enough. The pair tied up their skiff and approached the raft. "Permission aboard, sir?" said the mole as if he were in the Navy.
"Okay, then. Permission granted," said the beaver with a laugh. "Where's the toad?"
asked the rat, already knowing that no help would be forthcoming from that front.
"Okay, then. He left in one of his wagger boats, saying he must practice rowing," said the beaver. "Well, he's right about that. He does need to practice," said the rat. "I only hope he doesn't drown doing it."
"Are we ready to go?" asked the mole, sounding a little less assured now that the time was so near.
"Okay, then," said the beaver. "Cast off those lines and help us row out to the deep water."
They rowed slowly out toward the channel. Some of the squirrels were trying to help, but mostly they were splashing water everywhere. Finally, they made it and tied the raft to a channel marker. After many instructions were given by the beaver, who talked too fast and seemed to forget that most of the boat's occupants were hearing this for the first time, the mole ascended a rickety wooden stepladder to the top of the jug. He climbed in, wedged into the neck momentarily, and fell to the bottom with a ploop. He began to wonder how he would get back out without someone breaking the glass. The beaver was ready to get started.
"Okay, then I'll just tie this rope off here at the handle and he will be ready to descend." "How long will the air last in the bottle?" asked the rat. "Okay, then, not really sure, but you know how Toad is always huffing and puffing, and he was down a long while with no problems." "How will we know if he has a problem?" "Okay, then, we won't, but as you know, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs."
And with that said, the beaver sent the jug off the side with a slap of his bill and a smile. The rat watched nervously as the rope left the coil on the deck quickly and the bubbles rose to the surface.
"All those bubbles," said the rat. "Has the top come off?"
"Okay, then, just normal procedure." The beaver's strange way of talking was beginning to annoy the rat, and he wasn't sure if he trusted him, so he decided to see things for himself and jumped in. Only able to go down about 15 feet, his eyes followed the rope to where he could see the mole pressed against the side of the jug, looking a bit scared but okay. He watched until his air was almost gone and the mole was melting into the depths. Then the rat made his way back to the raft. As the rat was watching him, the mole was looking back up the rope, wondering if this was such a good idea. Then the bottom came into view and he forgot his predicament. The river bottom was a place of wonderment, fish everywhere and eels. A ship that had sunk was just in front of him, and as he pivoted around inside the jug he saw many things. Bottles, an outboard motor, a fishing lure, and bubbles, lots of bubbles, an anchor, shells, sticks, a log, and a car that must have fallen through the ice one winter. It was almost too much, a feast for his eyes. The seaweed danced with the current as the fish swam in and out of it. It was like he was in a theater, and the most beautiful ballet was being performed only for him. He could see quite clearly the things close to him, but everything in the distance was hazy. It wasn't really as dark as he had expected, but the water seemed to close in around him. Then he noticed where the sun was shining through the water from the surface, creating a blue-green water sun. It shimmered and danced and seemed to move toward him like a ball rolling slowly across the lawn. As he stared into it, he noticed something off to its side, almost like it was hugging the ball. At first the mole thought it was a fish, until he saw a tail with scales. But then it seemed to be a woman swimming because he saw her head and shoulders and her hair swaying like the seaweed. Then he realized it was the mermaid, as the two parts were from the same body. "The mermaid," he thought, "and I've seen her. I'm an adventurer. I, the mole, am an adventurer." Then he was jerked back to the present when the jug began rising toward the surface. "No, not yet," thought the mole. "I just got here." But his time was over. While the mole was enjoying his river bottom journey, the beaver did finally seem to be paying attention to business. He started the rope onto the treadmill so the squirrels could bring the mole back when it was time, and occasionally he did glance at the clock tower. The squirrels had all eyes on the beaver. Every time he moved, their heads followed him in unison. It was like watching the crowd at a tennis match.
"It has been long enough. Bring him back."
"Okay then, but a little longer," said the beaver. This did not even make sense to the rat, but he didn't know how to bring him back anyway, so he just stared at the beaver. The beaver immediately looked at the clock tower one more time, nodded to himself, and pulled a lever. The squirrels began running. The wet rope filled the turning shaft and the raft hummed. The rat stared down into the water, waiting for some sign of his friend. Finally, he couldn't wait, so he jumped in to take the last of the ride up with Mole. The rat held the outside of the jug directly facing the mole. The mole was so excited. He was telling the rat what had happened, forgetting that the rat couldn't hear him through the bottle. Just as well as what he was saying made little sense anyway. Shells and fish and anchors and ships and eels and bubbles and bottles and sand and a mermaid, yelled the mole. The jug was moving so fast toward the end. The squirrels do tend to get a bit excited when together, acting rather squirrely, you might say, that it popped out of the water and landed right back onto the deck where it had been earlier. The jolt dislodged the rat from the outside of the jug, and he landed on top of the squirrels and treadmill, causing an awful commotion. The beaver deftly tipped the jug on its side, removed the cap, and pulled the mole through the neck by the ears onto the deck. The mole tried to catch his breath as he fell flat, but couldn't, and instead just gasped. "Mermaid!" This brought a stop to everything.
"Mermaid?"
said the rat with disbelief.
"Mermaid!"
chorused the squirrels. "Okay then, a mermaid," said the beaver, as if this type of thing happened every day on the